Hi, I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story, where we have a brand new ebook waiting for you, absolutely free at businessofstory.com. It's called The 5 Stages of Grief in Telling Your Business Story, How to Overcome Story Fright to Grow Your Leadership, People, and Organization. In it, we help you deal with things like denial, that story actually works, or anger, I don't know how to tell a story, bargaining, I'll do anything but tell a story, depression, I have no good stories to tell, and finally, we're going to land you on acceptance of the power of story in your life. You'll become a master storyteller when you go to businessofstory.com and download your free ebook right now, and then start living into your most potent stories.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture. I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands. People buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
Have you ever seen the movie A Beautiful Mind? Russell Crowe plays John Nash, a Nobel laureate in economics who suffers from paranoid schizophrenia and endures excruciating delusional episodes. Today's guest is a madman ad man who suffered the same kinds of delusions, although his were induced by cocaine. He had a beautiful wife, 2 wonderful boys, a successful advertising career, and a growing agency when he lost it all. Blew through $250,000 running around the world, binging on cocaine, and ultimately waking up homeless on a beach in Santa Monica. I first heard of Tom from my good friend Michael Gass, who is a business development guru in the advertising, public relations, and design communities. He had worked with Tom. Michael, by the way, was featured here on Business of Story on episode number 36, if you'd like to hear how to define your brand position through story from his viewpoint on business development. Anyways, let's get back to Tom. Earlier this year, Michael pointed me to an article about Tom in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution titled Head Case. Tom Matt broke his brain with drugs and now sees things you don't. Pretty intriguing headline, so I read through the story and was absolutely blown away. I was so intrigued by how his drug-broken brain was telling him the stories and how he actually survived this whole thing, especially in the cocaine-colored world he was living in. And you know what? Tom courageously and happily accepted. So on today's show, Tom is completely transparent in the telling of his otherworldly odyssey. You'll hear how, according to Tom, every story has a subtext our subconscious is constantly alerted to. How he has a new superpower he calls Upsight, and how you could look for it in your own world. And how an angel visited him in Starbucks and saved his life. So strap in to this remarkable edition of the Business of Story and see what you can learn about your own brand storytelling from a storyteller who broke his brains with drugs. Tom, you have been on one heck of a journey, and I'm so glad that it is coming through the Business of Story. Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much, Park. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited to actually tell this story.
Well, you and I have a mutual friend, and how we got connected through Michael Gass. And Michael Gass is a brilliant biz dev person for the advertising, communications, design, public relations world. You know, anyone that's got an agency out there that is looking to really fine-tune their focus and attract the right kinds of clients, Michael Gass over at Fuel Lines is your man. In fact, we had him here on show number 36 last year. So Michael reached out to me and said, Park, you have got to connect with Tom. Apparently he did some work with you in your advertising days. And then I saw your article and I was just blown away with everything you've been through. So let's first start with your backstory, Tom. How did you build a very, profitable, successful advertising agency, I think in the lawyer field, and then have it all blow away, basically?
All right. Well, we got to go back a few years to 1992. I had a partner I'd worked with. He was the creative. We worked together in business. We came across each other. I was actually in the printing business. I went to school from the University of Georgia for advertising, but my first job was in the printing business. And we got together and we were in our 20s and we were cocky and we were like, you know what? We need to start an ad agency. And it was like, well, maybe a creative shop first. So, maybe we should do design and creative and eventually turn into advertising. We'll see. So we got together, his name was Rob, myself, another partner, and my future wife, Christy, and we started Max Advertising. I like to tell people that I was a new business developer and he was in charge of creative. It was good. And the other gentleman was in charge of creative. And Christy did kind of the bookkeeping. And I tell people, I say, listen, if you want to build a bridge or do any kind of near engineering, don't call me. If you want, you might as well just start throwing people in the water. Now, if you want to get people to come to the opening of your bridge and you want people to cross your bridge as opposed to your competitor's bridge, I'm the guy to call, or we're the guy to call. We can get results.
So you were the biz dev guy and he was the creative construction guy, and together you went out in the world and started this agency.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we started in actually healthcare. We had a lot of healthcare, business to business healthcare. We worked with hospitals. We worked with actually mostly hospitals. And we slowly got into legal marketing. It's a very niche business. But then again, I'm going back to 1992. So, and actually part of this story is my problem with addiction of cocaine. So if we jumped ahead to 2003, okay, that's 11 years later, we're successful. We've got a nice size agency.
How big was your agency?
Well, it depended. We had anywhere between 8 to 18 people. It really just depended on the economy. After the dot-com bust, we lost a few, but we always survived. On the personal side, I would do drugs for recreation, but I also noticed that it helped with my ADHD. I actually noticed that earlier. But in 2011, my wife and I would have our ups and downs. I was like, listen, I turned 40. I said, listen, I don't want to get 2 years clean and then mess around for a year. I really wanted to get it together.
So so I've got this timeline right. You started in 1992, your agency, and you grew it up. You spent about a decade building that. And then 2003, you found cocaine and started adding that to your daily diet, or your diet, to keep you focused and going. And now we've jumped forward to 2011, and this is when really all hell breaks loose.
Actually, no, let me back up. If I'm saying that, I'm not being as clear. I was using until 2003 on and off. Okay. A couple of years, I would be clean and then I would use. But in 2003, I had an epiphany. I was like, look, I really want to get it together. So I got clean and I stayed clean for 5 years. And I learned how to live sober. I started training for triathlons. I knew I could be happy and successful in my personal life without drugs. And also the work was going well as too. So we continued to grow and I was clean and, everything was great, as they say. Family life was great. Work was great. We were doing well with business, getting new clients. And then in 2008, an event happened that just shattered my world, shattered everybody's world, really. After 5 years clean, I picked up again. I picked up cocaine again. And this time when I picked up, something shifted in my brain.
Well, now that event you're talking about, you mean the recession hit? Is that the event?
No. Personal event. No. Who knows why? It's drugs. That's what I can answer.
You just kicked in again. Why. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I just picked up again. Now, this time when I picked up drugs, I became completely delusional and psychotic. I started believing absolutely ridiculous things. I didn't trust anybody. I believed that my wife, who was also my work partner, was an adult film actress. I believed that she put cameras up in our studio and was filming everybody. I was literally out of my mind. But it wasn't all the time. It was when I used. So one night I was at the agency and I told my partner with this. Now, he'd seen me acting squirrely the last couple of months, but I told him, I said, listen, you need to get down here because this is going on. He tried to deal with me the best he could. He knows I'm out of my mind. So he convinced me that evening to check myself into rehab again. So I go, but he will be gone in a few months. So I get to rehab And he's gone, I get clean and I'm like, look, I'll stay sober. He's like, well, you can stay sober, but I'm leaving and I'm taking some of the employees with me and some can stay with you. And we had a breakup as amicable as any business breakup could be.
And how big was your agency at this point, Tom?
At the time, we probably had 60 people, maybe 15, he took 60. Yeah, So we each took 8 people, something like that.
Yeah.
And, the employees that went with him, it was, like I say, it was as amicable as any business breakup could be. The employees that stayed with me, they're like, listen, Tom, you need to get your shit together. So I did. I was kind of, and also here's a really big, important part of this. My ego would not let me fail. You know what I mean? I know I'd screwed up. And also I knew I could live without drugs. So I rallied the employees that stayed with me. Some of the clients went with him, some stayed with me. And I'm like, look, let's build this agency again. Now we'll focus on legal marketing nationally. We were known regionally in the legal marketing field. That was our niche. But I was like, look, let's get a national presence. And that's when we met Michael Gass. We did I did some research on, because this was the relatively new field of social media. Blogging had been around, but social media was relatively new. We interviewed some people. Michael Gass came in. I'm like, this is the guy we need to follow.
And so, Tom, was this around 2009-ish, something like that?
Exactly, 2009.
Okay. So you are in the throes of the recession at this point, and everyone, including myself, who had an agency at the time, knew how difficult it was to get through that. You lost half of your business, and Michael Gass was very big on you had to focus, even though everything in your body said, no, if I focus too much, I'm going to lose all this other business. And by God, what I need right now is revenue. So I need to take any business I can get. But you just continue to focus even more directly in the legal world on a national basis. Is that right?
Exactly right. Mm-hmm. And, you read my mind. That's exactly what I said. I was like, we've got this other work. And don't get me wrong. When you focus, I found, and probably you have too, when you have a niche and you claim a position in the marketplace, there seems to be this halo effect. It's like, well, if they can do this really well, perhaps they can help us with this. That's not always the case, but that's certainly the case sometimes. Anytime you claim something and you own it and you lean into it, there's going to be some positive ripple effects in other areas. Mm-hmm. So we did everything Michael said. I mean, we follow his lead religiously. I mean, and there was a ton of work to do. We had to write a ton of, like 30 blogs in 30 days. Actually, it was more back then.
Yep. I know that drill. Yeah. Just cranking it out. Okay.
We got on Twitter. We started getting followers on Twitter. It was a little different back then in LinkedIn. And we started, I was an expert, quote unquote, in legal marketing anyway, but I educated myself more. I had experience. I knew what it was like to talk to people in the legal marketing field, the nuances. And I knew what it was like for them to have to deal with lawyers, because lawyers don't think exactly like other people, just like, healthcare doctors don't think like other
What was
people.
the name of your firm and your, value proposition or your tagline? Because Michael is always very good about getting you so focused that it comes down to a select few words that says exactly what you do.
The blog was the Matt Pad. Actually, you know what? There was no tagline. It was Max Advertising. Believe it or not, we didn't have one. Maybe he told me to do it, but I didn't.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
I can't recall.
But you were obviously just speaking to the legal field out there to keep them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and the look of the blog was called the Matt Pad, because it was based on the legal pad, those old yellow legal pads lawyers wrote with. So there was that. There was there was an image that went along with it. So everything's great, and we are getting found on Google searches within like 8 months. We're in the top search field for advertising, legal marketing agency, all these things, and we're getting work from all across the Southeast. I'm invited to speak at Legal Marketing Association nationally. Basically, everything that I said I wanted to do, the company said we wanted to do, worked. And we started getting the work, and we started picking up again, and we rebounded essentially from my dramatic psychotic break from 18 months earlier.
And now you're sober, right?
I am sober. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sober this whole time. Everything's great. I'm loving life. But as drugs will do, they snuck up on me. I got cocky. Who knows? You never know. But I do know this. In October 2011, I picked up again. And by January, 3 months later, 2012, I would completely lost touch with any objective reality. Now, I think my wife is an adult movie star. I don't trust anybody. I think my business is actually a front for her business empire. I'm out of my mind. Not only that, when I talk to my kids, I don't believe they're my children. I believe they've been replaced by aliens.
And would you have a couple boys?
I have two boys.
boys?
Yeah. At the time, one was in middle school and the other one was in high school. So, I'm talking about this matter of factly, but it was really a really horrible, horrible situation.
And you no longer viewed them as your boys, but as aliens that had taken over their bodies.
When I was talking,
Yeah.
right, but it was all subtle and nuanced. Again, this was all in my head, but something had snapped. Something had snapped in me, and I could not differentiate between reality, a thought, a delusion. Again, I say this looking back now because I have the distance from being sane for the last 6 years. But at the time, I believed every thought that entered, let me reframe it. A thought that entered my head would become a belief. And it was I say it was unsettling. It was unsettling then. I was just crazy. I didn't know it. I actually believed these insane things.
And were you only on cocaine?
Yes, absolutely.
Just
that
cocaine
was my drug.
Okay, so that was your drug of choice.
Well, you know what? Maybe I did some other things to calm down, but that was the driver.
That was the driver.
Was the big driver.
Now, how can you operate a growing national company, especially in the legal industry, when you were baked on cocaine?
You can't. You couldn't, and I didn't even try. Again, I started in October 2011. Again, by January 2012, I had snapped. I literally, since I didn't even believe that was my agency, I believed it was a front.
That's right, for your wife's.
Yes, for my wife's adult film empire.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah, it was insane. And all the employees worked for her. I mean, honestly, so there was a moment where I just said, listen, I'm not going back to the office because it's not really my office. I walked away and I just stopped returning phone calls. I stopped returning emails. I mean, I was completely out of it. Now, when I say out of it, don't get me wrong. If you and I had talked back then, you wouldn't say, you could say this guy's weird, you know what I mean? And maybe after a while, you would realize I was out of my mind. But it's not like I was running around screaming, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very subtle. The psychosis was very subtle.
Well, what's so fascinating to me about this, and when Michael reached out and I read your article that was in the Atlantic Journal?
The Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Yeah, just in January, folks. And I'll have a link to this in the show notes. But I was just thinking, of course, from the business storytelling and our mind storytelling capabilities, that here you are now under the influence of cocaine and coming up with these most crazy, fabulous stories. Your kids are aliens. Your wife is an adult porn star. Your agency is a front for her business that she hasn't even told you about. Isn't it just remarkable how our subconscious, and conscious mind makes up these stories, and we buy it and buy into it? So here you are now. You stopped answering phone calls. Are you hanging out at home with your door closed in your den and the lights off, or where are you?
Well, for a little bit I was, but then there's an incident, and you can read it in the journal, where I tried to burn down my house because I wanted to get the attention of the authorities, but I quickly put out the fire because I couldn't get through
Now, wait a
with
second.
it.
How did you do that?
Well, I tried to light my deck on fire, and as soon as I started it, I was like, okay, this is not a good idea. No matter what,
Was that your call for help? Was that
your
your cry for you gotta help me?
Clearly it was the first sign. But I would only go through so far with it, So instead, what happened was, Chrissy says, and Chrissy, that's my wife, she's like, look, we're scared, you need to leave. So I'm like, fine, I'm going to leave. And when I left, there was another shift in my psychosis. And now I didn't care about finding out this front. I was like, oh, you can have it. I'm just going to leave and I'm going to travel the globe. And I'm just going to, I didn't plan. I couldn't plan ahead. So I sit there and I say I did this now. I just started traveling. I started spending money on 5-star hotels, buying expensive clothes. And here's what's really interesting, Park, is that I would have my headphones in all the time. And the music was sending me messages, or so I thought. So every song had an additional message. I would listen to pop and rap and whatever, but mostly those two. And the song would have an additional message for me, and it would guide me, and I would follow it. And it was very unsettling. Again, I'm telling you this now, looking back, because I've got some distance between this happened. But at the time, I just did whatever came to mind, and I followed the music, or say what actually even
Can
when I read.
Can you recall a song that you heard and the message that it told you, that additional message right now for us?
Actually, no, I can't. But
Yeah.
any song, no, actually, any song would have a subtext. Actually, that's not fair. I will do it near the end of the podcast because it was one of the realizations I had, and I'll do it with something I read because it was an important. It was an important moment for my brain to realize what was happening. But it happened when I was reading, as opposed to when I was listening to music. It jumped out at me when I was reading. So I'll get to that a little bit later.
Okay, and real quick on that idea of that subtext, I just got to jump in here. Hollywood and going to Robert McKee's famous story seminar, and he talks about storytelling in movies, and he goes, it's always about the subtext. You say this, but what do you really mean down here? The brain is constantly fighting for what the subtext and the meaning is in either your body language or what you're saying or what you're projecting on a screen, whatever that is. And here you are experiencing that exact same thing in this cocaine-induced state while simply listening to pop music and rap. And your brain now is automatically looking in a very paranoid way, apparently, for the subtext of that message. That's just fascinating to me, wondering why does it do that? So I'm sorry, keep going.
No, that's great. And it's funny too, because I've thought about this so much and the difference between subtext and just even another message. So again, I'll get to that in a minute. So I'm traveling in 5-star hotels. I'm spending money on expensive clothes, but I did have a moment of clarity in early beginning, the first couple of months of 2012. I was like, okay, you know what? I need to get clean because this is just, it's not right. If I'm an addict and if I get clean, things will clear up. So I checked myself into Crossroads in Antigua, of course, the ridiculously expensive a Caribbean rehab. And this is when I'd realized I don't need to be on drugs to be psychotic. I was literally psychotic all the time. So I'm completely clean and sober on this island for a couple of weeks. But there was, again, I'll say it, you'll probably hear this a lot. There was another shift. So, and again, this is a little embarrassing to admit this, but I think it's important to realize what happened to my brain because the collapse helped rebuild it because whatever collapsed, it is certainly rewired in a different way. So, and while I was on the island for a brief time, I was believed that I was, Jesus Christ resurrected. Now that's not uncommon for people with schizophrenia, people with mental illness. So I was clean and sober and I'm like, it was bizarre. It's like, all right, you know what? I'm Jesus. Thank goodness it's not true. That's kind of a high bar, to set
Right.
for yourself. But really, I absolutely believed it. And that lasted for a time. As a matter of fact, I checked out of the rehab for one of the reasons I'm like, I can't stay here. I got a message, So I left the rehab early. So now I leave rehab early. I'm not on drugs. I go to California. I go to LA. And I stay in the Beverly Hills Hotel. Of course, again, all 5-star. And as I stay there, but of course I pick up drugs again because that's
And
what
Tom,
drug
when
addicts
is
do.
this now? Because this all began in early 2000.
This is April 2012. This is still the first. Yeah, this is the first
Okay.
half of the year. This is when in my book, I call it the high life because, I'm a psychotic, but I still have money. So, it's not as apparent. There's no, it's okay. When you're psychotic and you have money, you can get away with things that when you're psychotic and you don't, you can't. So that's a message that I got that was loud and clear. So I go to LA, I start doing drugs again. Eventually I head over to St. John's, the Virgin Islands. Okay. And on the way over, and I have this other psychotic episode that the aliens start telling me you're not going to leave the island alive. And now while I'm on the island, I stay there for a month and my brain, something happened. I can't even figure out how to use my phone. I can't connect with anyone in my family. Now they're mad at me, but they certainly don't hate me. They love me. And this time they just can't reach me. So they're really concerned for me again. And also I'd filed for divorce sometime in February, March, and all this stuff is going on behind my wife is going to these meetings and we get a divorce within 6 months, but of course I don't show up. I can't even, I don't do anything that's normal or planned. So I'm on the island for a month. I eventually leave for some reason. Again, you're going to hear that for some reason, Gwen Stefani, her song Gwen Stefani and No Doubt, she becomes my muse. Now I fly to London for a week now, which makes no sense because Gwen Stefani lives in Beverly Hills, but I fly in London because I have to get some messages from who knows what. Again. And I stay again in the Park 45 Hotel. It's owned by the Sultan of Brunei, the same guy that owns the Beverly Hills Hotel. And I start planning and how I'm going to go to Hollywood and how I'm going to start designing clothes for celebrities. In the meantime, I'm buying clothes, I'm cutting them and I'm redesigning them. So the psychosis, it's working. It's not, certainly it's psychotic, but I'm doing all these things that are not
I mean, on one hand, you're totally nuts, but on the other hand, you're able to cobble this life together that is actually pursuing these crazy pursuits and doing it reasonably well, apparently. You're flying yourself around the world. You're staying in some of the nice hotels. You're paying your bills, even though you're depleting your savings, but you're actually buying clothes and cutting them up so that you're going to become a clothing designer?
Yeah, right. A redesigner. I called it remixing clothes. And, you're absolutely right. It's almost like a child or a teenager. There was this element, there was this very immature element to it. It was absolutely immature. Now I'm 49 years old when this is going on. So I do all this. So then I fly to California to start, planning to meet with Gwen Stefani's business manager. Because of course you can't get to her. I'm going to tell him what I'm doing. Well, as I'm trying to do this, I stay at the Beverly Hills Hotel for a couple of weeks. I change over to the Chateau Marmont. And then of course it happens. I get a call from the bank one evening. They leave a voicemail because I never answer my phone. And they're like, you're overdrawn on your account. Now, I have no money left. None. The Christy got the divorce and she got what money we have. She got the house and stuff like that. All this happened when I wasn't there. So this is July 2012. I've got nothing. So I don't know how to live without money, So I managed to, this happens while I'm at the Chateau Marmont. I managed to get over to Santa Monica Beach and I start walking the beach, and I go into this 5-star restaurant. I order a steak and fries and I just walk out without paying. And I'm in like a fight or flight mode. Well, I'm not hungry anymore because I just ate. It's like 12 or 1 o'clock at night and I walk into this 5-star hotel, another one I'd stayed at. And I remember what floor the linen closet was on. So I go up there and I have this backpack that I carry. I just walk up to the 11th floor. I grab 2 of them. I stick them in my backpack and I walk out to the beach. And I walk down by the Santa Monica Pier with the Ferris wheel lights. And I just lay out the top sheet. And I wrap my backpack around my arm and I use it as a pillow and I fall asleep, and I don't know what to do. The next morning, this guy rides by in his ATV and he taps me. I'm under these 2 sheets and he says, sir, you can't live here. He goes, listen, if you're homeless, there's a homeless shelter on the other side of LA. And he gives me $1. And I'm like, oh, and he asks for my name and he writes it on this clipboard and I tell him my name and he drives away and I'm like, homeless? I'm not homeless. What are you talking about? And I'm like, holy Jesus, God, I am homeless. I have nothing. My family hates me. They don't trust me. Again, they don't hate me, but they're angry with me. I don't know what I'm going to do from one moment to the next. The executive function area, the area of my brain that plans for things, isn't working properly. So I managed to get a ride to the UCLA Medical Center.
Okay, so real quick, Tom, I got to ask you, are you still on cocaine at this point?
No, I have. No, I have.
Okay, but you're still psychotic. You're still in the throes. The grips
absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
Go ahead. All right.
So, no, I check myself into the UCLA psych ward and, I tell them what's going on. I'm like, look, I'm an addict, but something else is going on more than this because I don't know what's going on from one minute to the next. I tell them the story. Left my family. I think I'm going to do all these things, yada, yada. It's not yada, yada. But
Yikes. Okay.
So they check me up there at the 4th floor, the 5th floor, I can't remember. And this was like a shift. I knew, they give me a preliminary because I'm ushered out after 5 days. But before that, they give me a preliminary diagnosis of bipolar and addiction, and I'm like, no, that's ridiculous. Of course, everything you hear, you're like, no, that's not right. I don't know what's wrong with me, but that can't possibly be it. So I'm homeless. I'm back on the streets. The family doesn't want me back. I find a place in Malibu that will take me for a week if they think I'm going to pay. I stay there. Then I stay this place that takes indigent care, some place in LA, another place for a couple of weeks. So I'm in all those places. And then I'm calling Christy. I'm like, Christy, I have nothing left. And she's just angry. And she's like, well, you're psychotic. I'm like, I'm clean. And I am clean at this time too, for the most part. I say for the most part. So I come back for September and October of 2012. And it was just a real rough time for us. I kind of stayed in the basement of the house, that she'd had in the divorce. But for some reason, I steal the car. I wake up in the middle of the night because And I take Christy's car and I drive all the way across country to LA. In like 2 days, but I don't plan this. And by the time I get there, I have like $70 in my bank account, so this is, at the end of this thing, you're like, wow, this guy's psychotic. And there's a reason that, again, I've said it earlier, that it's important because the breakdown helps for the building up. So I get out there and I called these 2 young kids. There was a couple that I'd met through drugs and I hang out with them for a couple of weeks. I'm sleeping in the car. And of course they steal my car, please.
And does Christy know where you are, by the way?
And now I see it's funny. Cell phones are with us. So I have my phone, but she doesn't want to talk to me. If I call her, she knows where I am, but she's
And what kind of car did you steal? What'd she have?
It's a Lexus,
Oh, boy.
Nissan
Okay.
Lexus. Yeah.
She must really love you, by the way, Tom.
Well, she
Yeah.
does. It's a miracle. It's her forgiveness
All
is
right.
off the charts. It's real. Honestly, it is. It's unbelievable. And same with my children. I talk about that, or I write about it in the paper. It's forgiveness is an amazing agent. It's
Yes.
what it does. But in any case, I get ahead of myself. So now I'm in LA. I have nothing. The car's gone. I have no money, nothing. So I go, and I have no phone because they stole my phone. So I go to the insurance agent that we'd had forever. I find an insurance, and I stay out and I sleep in front of the house. I'm like, okay, then call Christy's agent, tell her what's going on. Now, so it's in the middle of the night when this happens, and I'm sleeping in the door. And the next morning, I walk into the Starbucks next door, and there's a guy sitting in the back, sitting down, and he's like, you look stressed. What's wrong with you? And I tell him what happened, and he tells me, I tell him, next door they'll help me talk to my wife's agent, and we'll figure this whole thing out. And he looks at me, and he's like, maybe you need to go get an electronic benefits card, and that's what people who don't have any money or job. That's so you can live. They put money on your card, and you can live. And also in LA, they'll give you perhaps when you sign up, they give you a place to live for 2 weeks. Now, the places they give you to live are not the nicest places. Obviously, they're crack houses and they're really, really beat down, but it's a lot safer than sleeping on the street. So this angel is sitting there, this guy who had no business being there, or he had any business he wanted. I don't know why he was sitting in Starbucks. It was like a nudge in the right direction, how I should take care of it. So he walks outside with me and he's like, listen, let me walk you down where you can check into this. In fact, the insurance agent moved and it's on the way. So he walks me there, and then after like 30 minutes, he's gone. It's like this angel was sent for me what to do, how to take care of myself, because now I'm in LA. My wife, I tell her what happened, so they go through all that. But now I'm in LA. I have no money except for what they put on this EBT card. It's called. They put $250 for you to survive the month, and I've got a place to sleep for 2 weeks. So I mean, come on, a small business owner. In December, by October, I'm homeless in LA with the pimps, the whores, the crackheads, the drug addicts, and I'm including
Well, I might
myself
also
in
add
that.
you're homeless in LA after spending about $250,000 flying around the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and not even realizing it though, too. Let's be clear on that. I knew what I was doing, but I didn't realize what I was doing.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So now I'm here, and here's an interesting thing that happened. Let me just tell you this little anecdote. When I first was at this motel you could check in, I went to get coffee at this corner gas station, and this gentleman walks out, and he says, hello, sir, how you doing? I'm 49-year-old. I'm drinking coffee, which I just paid for with my EBT card. I said, fine, how are you? He goes, good, have a good day. Now, I look disheveled at this point. Because I've been out there for a couple of weeks, sleeping in the car, but I don't look homeless. 1 week later, and I haven't shaven, I'm dirty, and I haven't even showered because of my mental state. I'm literally standing on the same corner. The same gentleman looks at me, and I'm drinking my coffee, and he's like, what are you doing here? He goes, you need to get the hell off this property. He goes, you're not allowed, and he runs to his security. He's a security guard for this corner gas station, and he gets a club. And I'm literally in shock. I'm like, wait, what's happening here? Now, first of all, nobody talks to me like that. You know what I mean? Why would you talk to me like that? He's like, get the hell out of here. You're not allowed around here. Get out of here. I don't want to see you again, or it's going to be trouble. I was like, wow. I mean, for me, it was a shock. I was in shock.
This was the same guy that was nice to you a couple weeks earlier.
7 days earlier, 10 days earlier, he was, you know what? I don't know. I guess not. I mean, 7 days not shaving and dirty and whatever.
More like trouble then.
It was just the whole... Right, but it was the whole thing about, how we treat homeless people. That's really what this is about. What did that cause you to do? Experience. Well, at the time, nothing. I was just angry. I was like, what a jerk, I mean, I've reflected on it since then. So now I'm out there and I am so depressed. I've got nothing. Nobody, I've burned every bridge. I've got literally nothing. I have no friends out there. My mind now is completely disconnected. I think I'm being followed by satellites, yada. Christy buys me a phone because she does want to make sure she knows where I am. So, and a friend of mine who I talk to about once a year, who happens to be a priest, who happens to be a therapist, calls because he called my old number that was stolen and I don't answer. Calls me and he says, he goes, wow, I just talked to Christy. He said, you've gone through a lot of stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm out here, and he can't believe it. He knows me as a business owner. I've known him since Catholic high school. And he's like, Jesus, Tom, do you need help? And I'm like, yeah. So he flies me to New Jersey. He's like, I can get you in a psych ward here. We can get you therapy. He flies me to New Jersey, and I stay with him for a couple of weeks, and I clean up, and he introduced me a therapist, and I start really connecting again. Because of him, I start really connecting again. I'm clean. I haven't done drugs. Christy through many phone calls, and plus she's having trouble with the children, or the boys are fighting with each other. She's like, I need your help, but I don't need your help on drugs. So within 1 year of the time I'm psychotic, I'm back home, and listen, it's
so
like
this is
walking on
2013, 5 years ago, right? 5 years ago.
This
and
is
so
5
now,
years ago, right?
Are you in the rebuild stage at this point?
No, now I'm in, I don't want to say PTSD, but we're all in shock. My mind is like explode. I am in shock. I'm depressed. I'm absolutely suicidal. What have I just done to my family, everybody I loved? I can't even think about having a normal communication with anybody. I don't want to be around people. And I'm just beating myself up for all the horrible things I did.
But that must be a bit of a turning point for you then, because now you are recognizing what you have just done for the past 12 months, and you're starting to actually feel those emotions.
Absolutely. That's exactly right, Park. I started to feel, because I'd missed things in 2012. And again, I was on drugs for most of the year, but not all of it, but I still didn't feel normal. I was not myself. And slowly in 2013, I DUI, I had to deal with some legal issues. But for January 2013, I sat on the couch and my mind slowly started to heal, right? My brain started to change. Christy gave me a Barnes & Noble gift card for Christmas, and I used it to purchase a book called The Joy of X by Professor Steven Strogratz. He's a mathematics teacher at Cornell. And this became my new obsession, okay? The paranoia started receding into the past.
What's The Joy of X about, and how did it become your obsession? What were you focusing on?
It's a tour of mathematics from 1 to infinity. It's a guided tour, and it occupied my extremely active mind.
And were you in mathematics prior to this, or was it just something? Okay.
Heck no, not even a little bit. The only thing I did with math is worried about percentages or margins for business. That was it. I didn't care about math. It's other than that.
But you got this brain that's on hyperspeed. Always sounds like it has. The cocaine even put it in overdrive. And now that you're coming down on it, you're trying to find a substitute for it. And mathematics becomes it. It becomes how your brain starts calculating these algorithms and whatever. So it has a place to spend its energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I do a lot of reading, and a filter, or my brain slowly starts to rewire itself. I stop believing crazy things. And I even think I understand how it was happening. And let me give you an example of that, because I said earlier about how reading or listening to things, the message, the subtext. So let me give you an example of something I was reading while I was sitting on the couch in early of 2013. So I'm going to read this passage out of a book. Here we go. No one fully understands how fracking is destroying the local environment. Jason Christie's, an environmental specialist from the New World Science Foundation, is researching how drilling and gas emissions are affecting the adult bird population in the surrounding area. Some local students also noticed a filmy layer of oil coating trees in a nearby park. Christie's fully understands that a negative report can impact businesses in many rural parts of Pennsylvania. His report will also impact where and when gas companies start to drill. Okay, so I would read something like that. Then I can't show you this because we're talking, but this part, if you think of it as about being bolded type, unconsciously, these words are in what I just read. So you're going to have to trust me here. These words pop out. Christie is an adult film star. So that subtext from the paragraph before would jump out in my brain, not only jump out, but I believed it. Now, this observation blew my mind. It was like one of those things where
So this was still happening to you now in early 2013 as your brain was recovering.
Well, it was happening, but it wasn't happening as a belief. It was happening as an observation. I was like, wait a minute, I'm getting another hidden message. Whatever, it's just cool. Now it's just fascinating. Now it's just my mind is rearranging these words or seeing other things. They don't have any meaning. There's no power behind them. I don't believe them, but something is changed.
And just this understanding that you've got now, it's no longer a belief that this is happening, but an observation. So you are just observing that this event is happening within your brain. Your brain is telling you a different story than what you're reading on the surface. You're getting the subtext, but instead of acting on that belief, you're saying, well, wait a minute. No, that's just an observation. That's pretty fascinating. The science of how my brain is making this work.
That's exactly right. And I even hate to nitpick, but I wouldn't even call it a subtext. It's like another message. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like another message. And I'm like, wow, this is powerful. And then now I'm paying attention. Again, I was paranoid before, but now I'm paying attention. And it happens with music. It happens with reading. So let me give you another example. So now I'm noticing it. Now, I'm also working on math. So I'm working on all these equations and I'm fascinated with math. And so now I'll read another. And what was happening before unconsciously has become conscious.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So let's say I'll work on a math problem and I'll go look at a book and I'll read something like this. John pulled the curtain away from the body. The one body he didn't want to see was Susan's. Damn, he thought, I was primed for anything but this. It had been a number of years since he saw Susan, 17 to be exact. He started to work back the sequence of events that led to this night. So I read that. Now another conscious part of my brain reads the one prime number started the sequence. And more often than not, I'll go back to my math work and I can use what I've just read. Bam! I would infer meaning when none is there, but it was useful. I found it useful.
Now that seems like a wormhole that could be a complete other episode. But what you're telling me is you're reading this stuff, but your math brain is kicking in and it's working with prime numbers, and somehow you're able to connect these two worlds from the literary world, I guess, into the mathematical world, and you're seeing this happen.
Absolutely.
These two parallels happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So this is happening. Okay, so I'm still depressed. I'm still, really bummed out having to deal with all this stuff. But I'm also realizing I'm like, wow, I was psychotic. The drugs clearly were the catalyst for it. Something changed in my brain. I'm more aware now. I need to look into this. I need to think about this more. Something's going on, and I need to get MRIs to see if there's, because of course everything you read about, some fascinating thing happens. There's a tumor, there's a lesion. I start getting MRIs. Actually, let me get ahead of myself, because one other thing happened, and this, as fascinating as that is, this is even more fascinating. So, because the reason is because the one thing I was crazy before, I say crazy affectionately, but another thing now, as I'm becoming uncrazy, something else opened in my brain. Every time I shut my eyes, I would hallucinate. So if you are becoming uncrazy and you tell somebody that, no, that sounds crazy. They're like, you know what? Maybe you're still
and what
crazy.
were the visions you were saying?
Okay, the first time I shut my eyes and this happened, you talk about subtext. We can go to a therapist for this. 4 things: blood going through my system, the back of a dinosaur's back, a slot machine, and the Grim Reaper. Boom, like that. That was, I write about that in the book because they were so vivid. And I was like, wait, what's going on here? And every time I'm starting, and this was January 2013, December 2012. Every time I would shut my eyes, there was a whole virtual reality is what I started calling it. So there's something else playing in my field of vision. Now, it didn't get in the way of my conscious thought. You know what I mean? I needed to shift my attention to pay attention to focus on it, but it was always there. So now my brain is getting better one way, and I'm realizing it. And it's, and by any measure, if you tell somebody that you're hallucinating, they're going to say you're still crazy. So now I'm like, okay, I need to go a neuroscientist. I have to get the MRI scans. And I tell them what's going on. Listen, I start going to the doctors, clinicians, and I say, here are all these things that I've done. There's got to be a physical explanation. Like I said, we've seen so many movies. We want a physical explanation. There's a tumor, there's a lesion or something. There was nothing. I had 2 separate MRIs. There's nothing. The best the clinical doctors tell me is that, again, this is cliche, the drugs must have opened a pathway and connected parts of your brain that normally aren't connected to each other. Well, obviously, that was a good answer, but it wasn't, I wanted more, because now I'm getting good at math. Or better at math. It was an education process. But, again, you feel like you're still crazy because these things are happening. I went to my eye doctor as well. And I said, listen, and I've seen him forever. So he knows me for 15 years. I told him exactly what happens. I'm like, listen, all I need to do is shift my attention and I can focus on these constant hallucinations. And he tells me after seeing 5,000 patients, he said, Tom, you're not the only person that's told me that. In fact, I had a guy come in here. He said a couple of people over the last 5,000, let's say 3. And some of the people were horrified of them because, you think you're going crazy when you have hallucinations. So they would never stay with them. They would never sit with them. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So now, never mind the clinical diagnosis. Nothing's wrong with me. Now I'm starting reading all these books on hallucinations, all the different types. I'm emailing academics across the globe.
Well, I was thinking about Oliver Sacks. Did you read any of his work? Because he was right in the middle of all this stuff.
You know what? He was in the middle of that, and he passed away right at the time.
Yeah, I think he would have loved to hang with you.
So I never, absolutely, absolutely. And it's funny too, because, I don't know anything about the world of academia, I don't, but at least, and I would email these people. I'm like, listen, I am $1 million grant. I don't have to wait for these things to appear. They happen on demand in a lab. I can do this. Now I'm thinking somebody's going to say, okay, come on in here. We need to stick you in an MRI, not to look for a lesion, but when you're using this hallucinations, which I've dubbed Upsight, and I'll describe those in a minute, we need to get you in an MRI and see what part of your brain is lighting up when this happens. So, but this hasn't happened. And I spent the next couple of years emailing these people, and I was fascinated by the lack of interest. Or, a graduate student would get back and they'd say it takes some time to get this kind of research. So I would go to Allen Brain Institute, MIT. I would, any book I would read for the layman by academic, if it hit a nerve, I would email them. Sometimes I'd get a reply, sometimes not. So I would, so that's what happened in 2013.
This and your brain started healing, and you start visualizing things in this virtual reality. You see one thing, but your brain actually serves up something else. So it's telling you stories, and it's led to this Upsight concept. Let's jump into that. What is Upsight to you?
Okay, so the hallucinations come in, they're so specific. That's what's that fascinating. They come in 3 types. The primary one, or the first one, is like when you go to a laser show and the lasers present on the side of a mountain or whatever the building they're going to play on. They're almost like a beam of light. And sometimes when I see them, they will actually spin out of control, like there's an interference. Now, I find that fascinating, but I can control it with a thought. Let's say you and I are talking about, what we want to have for lunch, and we're talking about pizza, right? If I would shift my attention and look at, you'd think something with Upsight or these visions would be a pizza. Not necessarily so. It could be a bicycle. It could be an elephant riding a bicycle across, tightrope wire. Now it's like, why is that even, that's just absurd. But once I pay attention to it, now if I see it, I'm like, okay, elephant, cook the pizza. Now I'm actually interacting with it. It's almost like once I focus on it, I'm talking to myself visually.
I mean, if you're there trying to order a pizza and work with the pizza, now you got an elephant riding a unicycle in a big top. How does that?
It doesn't help with the
serve
pizza.
you?
No. You know what? That's a great question. It doesn't, because that absolutely does not in any way, or any way that I can intelligently say. Yeah. No, it's just like my mind wandering. It doesn't. It's just fascinating. Because it doesn't serve me, or at least I can't figure out how. It's just like when your brain wanders, from one thought to another, but we usually do it visually. Mine does it, verbally. Mine does it visually. Now, that's the first type. The second type is, when you were a kid, you take a quarter and rub it, and the image would come through a piece of paper, be like pushing up. That's the second type. And that type is different. Now, sometimes we'll have one with the other, and I don't know which hallucination carries more information. You know what I mean? Sometimes when I think about math problems, it comes in one way. Sometimes it comes in with another. So that's how I find it useful, when I focus on it like that.
Oh, I was just going to say, it just gives you another way of problem solving, it sounds like. That it presents information in a different way that you now have to compute and figure out new ways of solving an old problem.
I'll get to that when we get to the math part, because everything is about dimensions, 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions, because you don't think when we see, we don't think in algebra. We don't think in algebra, or at least I don't. That takes steps. What I see are these 3 and 4 dimensional images moving through space, and then I have to translate those to algebraic equations. There's no manifold 3 or 4 dimensional shape that you can imagine that I cannot see. There's no doubt. And not only can I see it, I can manipulate it, I can fold it, I can invert it.
These are expressed in these hallucinations, like a laser beam of light. The second one is that stencil, that rub through of a quarter. What's the third one?
Okay, the third one is one everyone knows. It's like literally 3-dimensional images. It would be like if somebody just appeared before you. So that's just mind-blowing. It's like it's 3-dimensional. Now that one they've just happened a few times. And I shouldn't say that. It's not exactly clear. The scene in R2D2 in the original Star Wars when Princess Leia is putting
the hologram,
information into R2D2, and she's kind of bending over. Yes, exactly. That's what you see. That's better representation. It's not like a solid. That's the third type, and that is the one that comes the least. And they never stay. They're gone. And I don't know if I can.
This led to this concept of Upsight that you have. How do you define that? What is Upsight?
Upsight is the ability to access and interact with hallucinations. And those are the three types that I can access. Now, I like this because the place I access, it's like a Wikipedia, but I call it Schizopedia because it's not, some of the stuff is meaningless. It's not it's not a superpower where I can ask a question and get the right answer. I can think of problems or think of images, and the Schizopedia, or like a Wikipedia with schizophrenia, they point to the right answers. It's not that obvious. It still requires work to do. So it's almost like an unconscious. It's like a dream. These hypnagogic hallucinations, one of the types I was talking about earlier, I just brushed on it. Right before you fall asleep is a lot of times people experience hypnagogic hallucinations. And it's a very creative state. I think the guy's name is Kukuli. He's a chemist. He discovered the benzene is a ring in that state. I believe, again, I've tried to get academics to study this, that I'm in that constant state of hallucination all the time. I can access it on demand.
Tom, you now have this website,
absolutely.
Madness, Math, and Marketing. So let's bring this full circle. You started in the marketing world, the creative business, printing, then in your own agency, and you built a national agency, and then boom, you went on your escapade for 2013. Now you're back. 5 years later, you're working through this. What can we learn from you experiencing this as people, and especially as storytellers and marketing and just connecting with people?
Well, I'll tell you, in 2014, I started another marketing agency, a marketing consultancy, and I wanted to prove to myself, and this was really important because I lost everything, that I could get back in front of, CEOs and business people and not make a fool out of myself. I could still present creative, you know what I mean? And nobody knew that I'd been homeless and out of my mind. So I did that, I did that for a couple of years, and it was great. I was like, okay, I proved it to myself. But it's like I have this new gift now, and I didn't talk about it. I didn't talk about it. So I didn't differentiate myself. The most different thing about me is my Upsight and this ability to think differently. And the reason I think differently is because I see differently. And if I didn't.
And do you find it helps you solve problems in more creative ways, or how does it manifest itself in a deliverable or a service or connecting again with people?
All right, let me give you two examples of how this is a practical way for businesses or how I use it for a practical application. In 1926, a Swedish physicist, Oscar Klein, did a thought experiment imagining what it would be for an ant living on a very long, thin line of hose. You could run the hose back and forward without ever being aware of the tiny circle dimensions under your feet. Only like ant physicists with their super ant microscopes could see those dimensions. Okay? Every point in space-time is this little extra circle. So now, because they're too tiny for us to see. So now I take that question and I say, okay, Upsight, do that thought experiment. So now when I see that thought experiment through Upsight, what happens, is the difference is, his thought experiment, he is walking on the hose. My mind's, or the Upsight shows it, is that if those circles were that small, you wouldn't walk on anything. They would fall and they would move through you. So it shifts the perspective. It lets me see it from a completely different perspective. Not standing on the hose like he talked about, but the hose, the logical difference is if it was that actual tiny, like a little microbe, those things would go through.
And then how do you use that? Because I keep coming back to, it's just so fantastic that how do you actually then apply that to the rest of the world?
I use it for myself because I work on my mathematical problems, so, and I'm very fascinated by that. So I am just now starting to use this and put it out there for businesses. There's to answer your question, have I done something with Upsight other than my own personal mathematical problems that I've solved, in the business world?
Yeah.
Not yet. No, I'm just starting to do that. I don't even know what it is yet. But I know I'm ready to present it to the world. And I know there's innovators and there's people that think outside, that think, like I do. And I know I can add value and look at any type of problem in a different way. There's no doubt. Let me give you one more example. And I think this might help. Everybody can understand this. You know how when you see, just to show you how Upsight visually sees things different. Okay.
Right.
Everyone sees a double rainbow. Everyone has seen a double rainbow, correct? Okay. So when you see that, it's on, the illusion is it's on a flat plane. It's like two arcs, or if you're maybe looking down from an airplane, it's two circles. If you notice, that inner circle is a little bit brighter it's a little bit, it's like there's a little bit more light on it. When I shut and the outer circle, between the first and second circle, there's a band there that's called Alexander's band that's a little darker. Okay. When I shut my eyes and Upsight shows me that it's not just a flat or two-dimensional thing. That inner circle is actually the inner rainbow, and it sounds weird, but it's the way it is. Comes at me like a funnel, and it's brighter. And the external one or the outer one is moving away. And the reason that you have that darker band is because those two rainbow funnels are overlapping. Now, I know that's like, well, how does that help? It really just shows you how Upsight sees things in different ways than our normal vision. Is it going to answer any problems? Who knows?
That's your exploration. Absolutely. It's just how the mind takes over. I mean, literally, the mind has a mind of its own. You hear that phrase all the time, and you've experienced it. You've gone through it in some of the craziest ways you could possibly imagine. And good thing you live to tell about it. It's
a miracle. And again, I give all the props to my wife. We've talked about, what I've been through. I couldn't have done it without her. I mean, we are so lucky. Her patience, her kindness, and my boys too, Before this, we were a close family. It's not like I went off and sometimes I isolated, but we were tight, and this just broke everything up, and we come back together. And in fact, we're closer than we were before. And so I would never want anybody to use this as a reason to, I would never want anybody to use drugs to open any part of their mind.
Tom, what it tells me, especially in the communications world that so many of our listeners are in, and the storytelling world, is you have to be so explicit in your marketing, storytelling, and connecting with the primal brain to get your message across. Otherwise, you completely leave your story up for interpretation by your audience, even the sober audience. And if you're not clear, that sober audience is going to make up its own story. Its subconscious is going to take over and knit together sometimes crazy artifacts to make sense of what you're trying to communicate. So in the communications world, leadership world, brand storytelling world, I think it goes back, at least for me, and after reading your article a few weeks ago and just listening to you now on the show, it just underscores how important it is to get our brand's stories straight and to make sure that we are brief, to the point, and very vivid in how we tell our stories. Otherwise, we run the risk of our audiences making up their own stories about us. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And, Christy and I talked about, Tom, do you really want to lead with people saying you were crazy? I'm like, yeah, because I was, and it changed the way I thought, and it's my story. My tagline that I use
there you
is
go.
out
Michael
of your mind
Gass
thinking.
would be proud of that. Out of your mind thinking.
Yeah, it's what I do. That's what I do.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for coming on our show and being so vulnerable and just telling us everything you've been through. It's absolutely fascinating. Now, are you writing a book, or is the book already available?
The book's done. I was working with a publicist. She started reading it. Yeah. She's like, Tom, this is really good. You need to try to get a literary agent. And she's introducing me to some of that. I was going to self-publish, but...
And in the meantime, people can follow you at Madness, Math, and Marketing?
Madness, Math, and Marketing. Yeah, marketing. Yeah, absolutely. You can learn more about Upsight, the way I see the world.
I got a feeling that's a whole other show as well. Well, thank you, man. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, huge. I mean, just so interesting. And I can't wait to see your book out. I've been reading through your blog posts. They're very entertaining, very interesting, folks. Visit them at madnessmathandmarketing.com. And Tom, thanks again. Thank you all for listening to this amazing edition of Business of Story. And if I can help you get your story straight, visit me over at businessofstory.com. I've got your DIY notebook just waiting for you to download. It's only $45, and it will literally change your life. It can lead to millions of dollars when you get your brand story straight, because my job is to help you clarify your story, to amplify your impact, and maybe most importantly, simplify your life. So visit me over at businessofstory.com. And if you were as fascinated about this episode and hearing Tom's story as I was, please share it with friends, family, loved ones, colleagues, whomever. Share the Business of Story with your friends. It helps grow our network, and you will have some impact on other people, just like Tom has had on you today. So thanks for listening, and join us next week when we will have another story artist here to help you craft and tell compelling stories that sell. And until then, please remember, the most potent story you are ever going to tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks for listening.